G'day fans and welcome to the return of good old Sci-Fi Zone. After a couple of years absence, it's good to see that we're finally back. Now with everybody in lockdown and the curfews kicking in and all the rest of it, we actually felt that this was a really good opportunity to bring our show back after a long absence. Now we know that some people out there will have absolutely no idea what Sci-Fi Zone is. And if you are interested in knowing a little bit of history, it was actually a live action, if you want, TV show that we produced back in 2019. And if you wanted to see what it looked a bit like that, which was kind of cool. So we absolutely loved it. We had a really, really good time. But unfortunately, once we... Oh, there we go. Oh, there we go. Just pressed the wrong button. I ruined my big intro. Anyway, I was going to say, after last year, we ended up doing a single show, which looked a little bit like this, which was complete tripe and not at all enjoyable. COVID obviously killed it and took us out of business. But we are back. And the most important thing is that we're actually bringing back one of our co-hosts. I've already spoiled the surprise already. So without any further ado, Claire, welcome to Sci-Fi Zone. I've got my buttons all mixed up. Unbelievable. How you going?
Good, very good. Yeah,
very good. Now Claire hasn't been on the air, as in like on the airwaves for like almost a couple of years now. So how have you been holding up? What have you been doing with yourself?
Oh, I don't know, same as everyone. Coping with lockdown and living my life and watching lots of sci-fi and reading lots of sci-fi.
Absolutely fantastic. Now, I know that there's going to be some people watching this show right now who are going to be going, well, who's Claire? Where did we find Claire? Where did she come from? Now, I didn't just go down the street and there's like this lady just walking on the road and go, hey, do you want to be on this show? Actually, Claire is a bit of a cool person when it comes to her cred points in the fan circles. So, Claire, give us a bit of a rundown as to how cool you really are.
I don't know about cool. But I've been a science fiction fan for a very long time. I can remember watching Doctor Who hiding behind my dad's chair when I was about 6. So it's been a lifetime. And then got into Star Trek in high school through the books. And then later on found fandom. And fandom for me initially was Oztrek, the Star Trek fan club. I found that and I made a few friends there, and then I got onto the committee and started running things, and that kind of became a bit of a habit. I've helped run lots of conventions, including Worldcon when we had it in Melbourne in 2010, and I've been to Worldcon in various 4 different countries now, I think, representing Australia a lot of the time, having a bit of fun with it, and then helping out with some of the local conventions, First Contact conventions and Supernova.
Sorry, go on.
Those sorts of things. Yeah.
Love this comment from Michelle. Being modest. Yeah, absolutely. Actually, I was thinking exactly the same thing. So, I mean, Claire, working on a Worldcon, for those, there'll be people out there who don't know what a Worldcon is. That's the World Science Fiction Convention. They've been holding those since about 1936, and 4 of them have been run in Australia, all of them in Melbourne. And to be on the committee for a Worldcon is a bit of a big deal. So Claire's kind of selling herself short on that one. You're on the, you were a secretary, weren't you?
I was, the membership manager. So it was a pretty big deal, and ran the registration desk at the event as well. So yeah,
absolutely fantastic. Cool. So we'll probably end up having a discussion in one of our future chats about what exactly Worldcon is and some of our own various memories, which is very, very cool. But of course, other than that, Claire was also a Duff winner. Now, for those who are thinking The Simpsons, no, she did not win a whole case of beer. The Duff is actually something a little bit more prestigious than that. So give us a quick rundown as to what Duffin is.
Okay, Duff stands for Down Under Fan Fund, and basically it's an event where every 2 years we organise to send someone from Australia over to the US, and in the intervening years, someone from the US to Australia, and it's all mostly funded by fans. So if you run for it, kind of like the Olympics, you have to run for it a year in advance, and all the fans get to vote and make a small donation to be able to vote, and then all that money goes to helping pay for the trip, and you go around and stay with fans. So I spent 6 weeks traveling around the US, staying with fans and going to conventions and just generally having a lot of fun.
So
way out of my comfort zone in a few places.
Just like you're out of your comfort zone. It's just like you're out of your comfort zone right now. Is that right?
Yes.
Yes, exactly right. So very, very cool. Now, Gavin, how cool can Claire be? Damn cool is the answer to that question. So if you get nominated for the Duff, that is a bit of a big deal. So fans are actually paying to send Claire overseas, not because they want to get rid of her. They're actually saying, go over there and represent the country. So that is very, very groovy. And all the things that I've done in my time, I've never been a Duff winner, and I've never been on the committee for a Worldcon. So, I've got a long way to go before I catch up with Claire's coolness. And, of course, and one thing she has actually mentioned is that she's been on the executive committee out of 3 of the 4 fan clubs in Victoria. So there you go. MSFC, Star Walking, Austric, of course, just missing out on the Doctor Who Club Victoria. So Phil Nichols is going to be watching this at any point. Mate, you need someone to work on your committee. Get Claire involved. As for myself, yeah, nice shirt. Dave, yes, I've decided to upgrade my my attire from from my usual fare. So I hope you like it. It's a bit in theme, as it were. And Claire did actually send through a couple of pictures regarding Claire of her time. Now, the picture on the left is from a Worldcon in Ireland. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah, that was 2019. Last time we were able to travel overseas, I went to Eurocon, which is a European annual convention, was in Belfast, and Worldcon was in Dublin. So, and they were like a week apart. So I figured, why not go to both? That was a really good event. It was a lot of fun. And you can see in that picture, I'm wearing my Sci-Fi Zone t-shirt.
As you should. Yeah, it's very funny. I actually asked Claire, can you please wear the shirt when you're over there? And she goes, oh, do I have to? I mean, really? Oh, God, oh, the pain of it all. It was all
but I did.
Sorry?
But I did.
You did indeed. And then Stephen Thomas says, no, you sound like a natural, which you are, which is very, 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 very cool. So there you go. All right. So one of the reasons why this show even exists in the first place is that when we did Sci-Fi Zone a couple of years ago, I mean, one of the things that we're all fans of is actually science fiction movies and TV shows. And it's just an outlet to sort of just discuss these things. And, of course, now, unlike the show in 2019, which was all pre-recorded, we actually are allowing or encouraging people to sort of give us their feedback on their thoughts and views as to the topics we're covering off. And so that's the cool thing about it. So we know, as I said at the start, we're all in lockdown. We've got nowhere to go, no one to see. So this is probably like a bit of a Band-Aid fix for getting some entertainment out there for people who are sci-fi nerds who want to discuss stuff. So very, 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 very cool. Now, as always, we like to cover off what we've seen and done in the past, say, week or couple of weeks regarding science fiction things. So have you got anything that you've seen or done in the past week or two that you want to report on?
No. Oh, really? I mean, I've been watching lots of science fiction shows, but...
Yeah, very good. Well, for that, if you're going to say that to me, I'm just going to do this to you so you get to run the whole... Absolutely fantastic. All right, well, I've actually got one I want to bring up, which is actually quite funny. So I've been watching the Paralympics because the Olympic Games were on a couple of weeks ago. We've got the Paralympics on now. And just before we went on air, Australia won a goal for Australia in the table tennis. It's absolutely awesome. I was watching the Paralympic ladies cycling, velodrome cycling, just the other day. And I had to look at the screen again because there was a lady from the Netherlands whose surname was Groot, right? And I thought, how about that? Groot. Now, so far as I know, Groot could be as common as Smith in the Netherlands. I've got no idea. But I thought if her name was like Isabel Mavis Groot, because they always put the initials of the first name up there, it would be I am Groot. How good is that? So there you go. Now, here we go. Cleveland Collins joined us and said, you rock. Yes, we know that. And we know that Claire is way cooler than me. So, yes, it's no surprising things there. There are other things that I wanted to sort of bring up, including the history of the term science fiction. Now, here's a question for you, Claire. Now, I had to look this up. I didn't know this, right? Do you know where the term science fiction actually came from? Who thought of it and what it really meant? Do you know?
I mean, I've read the history a long time. I know the sort of precursor to it was scientific fiction.
Very good. Well done.
Yeah.
See, this is why you're This is why you're so cool. So I couldn't even pronounce that one word, this really ridiculous word that's sort of two words joined together. Can you say that again for me?
Scientific fiction.
Oh, see, that is just, I'm just, my heart is beating like at an accelerated rate. How cool is that? Anybody else reading this? Now, don't look it up, everybody else. Now, already Claire's way cooler than me because I didn't know that. I had to read about it. So, but do you know who thought of the term and what it actually means?
No, Dags, why don't you tell us a story?
Sit down, everybody, and just So David said Mary Shelley. No, it's a good guess, but no. Actually, it was from Hugo Gernsback, the fellow who created the Amazing Stories magazine back in the 1920s, and he was a sci-fi author, apparently not a very good one. But the key thing was that he came up with the term science fiction. Now, science fiction had been written before then, H.G. Wells and Jules Verne and all the rest of it, but the term didn't exist at that point. It didn't appear until he thought of it. So you're right, he had a scientification, that word that you said, and then it was split in two. And what it actually means, and I thought, I didn't know this until I read a report from 1956 of all places. It actually was referring to science that it didn't exist today, but could become like real life in the future. And obviously space travel is a perfect example of that, where like in 1926, they barely even fly, let alone fly into space. And of course, we've got the space station and whatever else. So they worked on the view that saying it is a scientific discovery that doesn't exist just yet, but it will and it can in the future because of science, which I thought was actually very, very cool. So how about that? Is that impressive or what?
That's very impressive, Dad.
Yeah, very, very cool. And of course, fantasy came with the idea of saying, well, that's something that'll never exist no matter what. So like flying horses and maybe even time travel. I don't really know. So spelling bee, yeah, scientific. I just couldn't get it. So very, 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 very cool. All right, so
very, very close. Not quite right, Thomas. Very close.
Yeah, exactly right. So look at these. Dave said he stumbled across a whole list of underrated sci-fi movies and he's downloaded them all. Oh my God! Hey, how good is that? Very good. And I know a D-Groot. Oh, very good, Christy. That's very, very cool. Good stuff. I like it. Someone said, Thomas has said, it was an awesome table tennis final. We'd love to have seen it, but I was too busy here just doing this damn show. So very, very, very cool. All righty. Now, the topic for tonight. Now, this show isn't going to be as long as we used to do in other shows. So if you used to watch our shows last year, they went for an hour and a half. We were nowhere near going to be as long as that. Now, typically, we were looking at doing or having discussions that were a bit more in-depth, real brain-bending, mind-twisting, brains leaking out your ears type stuff. But tonight, we decided to go light and fluffy. Okay, something simple to start off with, just so everybody gets into the zone, as it were, with our chats. And we're going to be talking about movies and TV shows made in the 21st century, which is 20, well, if you want, 0.8 years worth of stuff. How about that? So we just wanted to sort of just toss some ideas out there of things that worked and things that maybe didn't work. So, Claire, I'm just going to handball it over to you. So what have you got? Where do you want to start? What, in terms of 21st century stuff, do you want to just like bring up and chat? Oh, there's messages popping up everywhere here at the moment. So go for it. Anything that sort of like sort of springs to mind.
Well, I mean, I'm a massive Star Trek fan. That's kind of my first love when it comes to media sci-fi. So, of course, we've got to talk a little bit about Star Trek. And for me, the reboot, the 2009 movie, was just brilliant. I loved it. It worked for me so well. They kept all the old characters. The casting was amazing. They gave us a good reason for it being a reboot. Like they didn't just pretend nothing ever happened. They actually gave us a reason for the change in the timeline. The chemistry between the actors on screen I thought was brilliant, and that before you even get to the credits, I'm in tears every time. So for me, that was just that worked brilliantly.
Very, very cool. Got a message here from the Vial. I thought this would be a greens cooking show. I don't really know what that means. So
no, Dags, I've had my greens already. I had them before the show, and it was gnocchi with basil pesto. For those who are interested in following my Facebook page, that's my challenge for lockdown.
Very good.
I can explain that a bit more when we talk about one of the other movies.
Very, very good. I love it when the Vial violates somebody else's greens, which is just very, very cool. So I think it's interesting to note that when I was doing some research on this, like in the past 20 years, that at face value, because everybody refers back to the 80s and the 70s, even the 90s to a degree, saying, that was like the golden age of science fiction movies and TV shows. But until you do the research, you don't realize just how much good stuff has actually been coming out since the year 2000. And there's more of it than you actually realize. Now, to be fair, there's a lot of reboots and remakes and all that sort of stuff. And some people went for that. Some people didn't. And there was probably more of them than they needed to be. And it was definitely worth noting that old franchises sort of suddenly made a new reappearance. So you did actually, aside from, as you said, like with Star Trek coming back, even as a TV series, Enterprise was still being made in the early 2000s. So Doctor Who sort of like came back to life again in the mid 2000s. And of course, even Star Wars ended up being on TV for a period of time and still is. And other shows like your Lost in Space found a new bit of resurgence, and Battlestar and V and all that. So there was. In your opinion, do you reckon that there were too many reboots, remakes, or it all just worked quite well?
I think, well, a lot of them worked quite well. A few of them didn't. But in terms of there being too many, I don't know. I don't think so. I think it's really good to give the younger generations, I suppose, a chance to really get their teeth into some of the stuff that we loved when we were younger. It probably looks to us like there are vast numbers of remakes and reboots and that kind of stuff, but not everyone will have seen the stuff before. And I think giving a broader audience a chance to get into some of that stuff is really cool. And I mean, some of them worked, like the Star Trek, well, the 2009 movie particularly worked really well. The sequels, I'm not going to start talking about the second one. But things like Doctor Who, like that was a whole new audience, and not just the younger generations, but people who hadn't watched Doctor Who before, that could have seen it now and fallen in love with it. And they did a lot of things that were really interesting too.
Very cool. It's very funny because the Star Trek movie, as you mentioned, was almost like a remake. Well, not a remake, a reboot from the original series. They were like almost intertwined. So it wasn't like a TV series being remade as a TV series or a movie remade as a movie. Sort of like it started off as a TV show and then went to the movie. So sort of was an interesting sort of way of looking at it. But I certainly don't disagree with you in the fact that, yes, it certainly revitalized the Star Trek franchise in a big way. Interesting, William has said there's actually been too many reboots, and there's actually more than most people realize. I was doing a bit of a listing myself. Some of them, and I agree with you, some of them were based on movies from yesteryear that are probably long since forgotten. So other than them, like your War of the Worlds, which got remade, the Tom Cruise version, which I thought was actually an excellent remake. Your Time Machine, Dave the Earth Stood Still, which a lot of people groaned over when that came out. There was actually a Journey to the Center of the Earth. It's like the Brendan Fraser version. Brendan Fraser? Yeah, version.
Brendan Fraser. Don't get his name wrong. Brendan, we love Brendan Fraser.
Yeah, that's cool. But there are also more recent ones that came out, films that were like made in the 80s, like RoboCop and Total Recall got remade. I found it interesting that like Judge Dredd got remade. So that was the Sylvester Stallone version. I think it was in the 90s. Got remade with Keith Urban. No, Carl Urban. Keith Urban's a singer. Carl Urban. And even like there was even reboots within the 21st century. So Superman Returns, which was like a sequel to Superman 2, and then like a couple of years later they made Man of Steel. So they rebooted a reboot. Oh God, what was the deal with that? And of course we've got the June film coming out. Probably not next month because of the cinema shutdown, but that you could argue is a remake of the '84 movie. So there's actually a lot more than most people realize. What do you think?
Yeah, the Spider-Man one was the other one that they seem to be doing it over and over and over again. I completely lost interest in that.
Totally agree. So yeah, it's an interesting discussion about things that should or should not have been remade, and definitely there are examples more where it didn't work than where it did work. I do know of people who saw it, and I like Day the Earth was still. I gave that a go. I said I'll go with an open mind. I'll give it a shot, and most of the way through, it's like, all right, I get it, but I don't get it, and then it just all went to pieces after that. So, it's hard to do a good remake, especially if the original is really, really good. So, are there any that sort of stand out in your mind and go, you know what, that remake was absolutely spectacular?
Not that I can think of off the top of my head.
That's okay.
Oh, Total Recall, actually. Yeah, Total Recall I found really good. It was the story was quite different from the Schwarzenegger version, but it was actually closer to the book in a lot of ways. And I found a lot of the stuff they did in that was really interesting and really clever. And of course, you can do a lot more things now in terms of special effects and computer generated imagery and that kind of stuff that just didn't really work very well back in the 80s. So that was one that I particularly liked, which kind of surprised me. I didn't have high expectations for it when it came out. And I really enjoyed it, really found that a good one.
Yeah, I totally agree. And of course, had very, very strong links to looked very, very Blade Runner-esque too at the time.
Yeah.
There was a comment here from Michelle saying that CG has made things more believable on screen, and it has. I mean, from the old days. Unfortunately, old special effects can look old when they're like being superseded multiple times by newer technology. But I mean, there were still things that were made 20 years ago, less than 20 years ago, say 18 years ago, that still look dodgy even today. But it certainly has helped, that's for sure. And I guess the more believable something is, the less likely you're going to go, oh my God, that looks complete tripe. So, and even on TV budgets now, they're doing really, really good stuff. So, yeah, it's actually quite impressive. Yes, and yes, there's a lot of yeses going on here. I'm not sure what the yeses were.
There's a comment there from. Oh, sorry, go on. No, I was going to say there's a comment there from Michelle about Westworld. That's an interesting one.
Yeah, I was going to sort of bring up Westworld a bit later on. So Claire and I were going to go through our top picks of the 21st century, and so now that we've brought it up, Westworld really was completely left field in a lot of ways, and took the concept from the. I don't know how close it was to the books, but if you remember the 1974 movie, and it really, really took it in a different direction, and that then brings in the discussion of whole AI sentience. There was some really, really good stuff that came out. In fact, I was just thinking, even like we were discussing Star Trek earlier. I mean, there's a lot of Star Trek coming out at the moment. So you had your Enterprise at the start of the 2000s. Now you got Discoveries, and you got Picard, and you got your Lower Decks, which is the animated series, and they're even talking about new series. So Star Trek is going through a massive resurgence at the moment. What do you think?
Well, I mean, I've really enjoyed Discovery. Picard's a bit more hit and miss for me, and I haven't actually watched Lower Decks. But there is a lot of it out there. But the other thing about it is they're all quite different. They're all the focus is different, and the way the stories are told is different. So the audience is actually quite different, which I think is a good thing. I think broadening that audience gives a lot of people a different reason, different entry point into Star Trek and therefore science fiction. So I quite like the fact that they're doing different style sort of ones at the same time. I like that. I think it's good.
Colin's made a very good point about the fact that so many with streaming services now, shows are being produced everywhere, and there's and that's what I was mentioning earlier when I didn't go through it in detail, but when I was doing a quick bit of research, I thought, oh my God, there's more stuff than I actually thought of, and there's a lot of material that will go under the radar that ends up on a streaming service that no one watches, and it sort of just slipped through, and it's like, oh, okay, and then somebody will say, hey, have you ever seen this? And you go, no, never even heard of it, and then of course it maybe get cancelled because it just it didn't get picked up, even though the quality could be really, really good. Or you can have shows that have a certain timeline they work to, and they go, yeah, we're only going to be on screen for 2 seasons or whatever, and that's as far as they go. But yeah, we're from a period back in 30 years ago, 40 years ago, where it was hard to get hold of anything. Now we're spoiled for choice, and of course that will mean that some things will work better than others. But yeah, what do you reckon?
Yeah, definitely.
Very, very cool.
It's good. Sorry, I completely lost my train of thought there. I got distracted by Michelle's made a comment about Firefly, and that was one of the ones.
Yep.
That was one of my favorites too. That whole Western set in space, I actually really liked the way they did that, and there were a lot of things about that just worked for me. And the movie, as she says, the movie Serenity. I thought that was really good.
There's a very good comment from Dave about saying Back to the Future should not be remade, and yeah, it is interesting. Some people celebrate when a remake is being done, and others cringe. And I guess if the source, we've discussed this on other shows in the past, if the source material is that loved and that revered by everybody, then realistically you'd think it's a risky proposition to say, yeah, let's have someone reboot it. And you do wonder. I mean, obviously the mindset, is about money first, right? It's the old adage, hey, if it worked 30 years ago, it'll work today, right? Regardless of whether the fans want it, whether the fans are interested, and it can introduce a whole new audience. But first and foremost, it's all about making the dollars. And I guess in some cases, most cases, they probably do, even if a lot of people end up crying their eyes out over it afterwards. So what are your thoughts regarding that? Sorry, go for it.
No, I was just going to say it's a pretty big assumption to make that if it worked back then, it'll work now, because things have definitely changed. Attitudes have changed, and the way we do things have changed, and the possibilities that exist now also have changed. Back to the Future is an interesting one. I'm not sure how I feel about that, but it'll be interesting to see. And in terms of money, as you say, if people who have seen it in the past are either going to avoid it like the plague, or they're going to go hoping it'll be good, or hoping it'll be a disaster. But most people will watch it one way or another. So there's always kind of that base level of assurance that there'll be a group of people who are going to watch it, whether it's good or not, based on the previous version.
I find, like, you used to get movie series, and there's a lot we can discuss there, where they would just keep churning out a sequel after a sequel after a sequel, and you go, my goodness, aren't you over it by now? And they go, no, it still makes money. We can do them really cheap. Home Alone, just as an aside, 4 of them. It's like, how often can a kid get stuck at home by himself? Freaking ridiculous. And that's sort of like watering down the quality pool at the end. It's like, if you had, like, E.T. was made in 1982, right? And there was just the one only movie, just one. And it was a huge success, and that was the end of that. But if someone had a seat in the studios and they go, yeah, let's make it, he comes back, for whatever reason, wants to see Elliot and, ride the bike and all this sort of bullshit. And then they make one after that and one after that, one after that. Just the logic of how things work would mean that by the time you got to the 3rd movie or the 4th movie, people go, oh, mate, what have they done to the E.T. series? They've completely ruined it. And I guess it's lucky it has not been touched at all. There's been copycats, if you will, but not a direct remake. E.T., The Return is like, oh, no. What do you reckon?
Your comment about watering down the effect, I think E.T. is a really good example of the fact that it hasn't been watered down. People still feel the way about E.T. that they did when they first saw it. And people who see it now for the first time still feel the same way about it that we felt when we first saw it. And if there had been sequels, then that just wouldn't be the case. It wouldn't be the same at all.
Love it. So Colin has said, as I say, you got to watch Lower Decks, which, for those who don't know, is an animated series that's set after Nemesis and Picard, and it's all canon too, which is quite good. I like this from Aaron. At this rate, Home Alone 5, the nursing. Actually, we're all in our own version of Home Alone. We could do just home movies, and there's your sequel. So can't argue with that. You're never going to know until after the fact. Sometimes remakes should work, and they just don't. Example, RoboCop. You're right. They should, and for whatever reason, you could do probably a real, like, deep dive essay. We probably will in a future episode as to the nuts and bolts as to why it didn't work in the first place. What made? With all the technology available and visual effects and all the rest of it, why can something that's remade from back then not work today? Even if the original was a huge hit. Even to a new audience, it doesn't work, and there's, they get critically panned and all this sort of business. What is the cause of that? But we won't go through that today. We'll save that for a future episode. That'll give everybody a reason to sort of come back and join us again, rather than just abandoning us after the first episode. So there you go. It's a very good discussion, and because I think in most cases the remakes don't work as well. And you're right, some people just shudder at the thought of them. So, but yes. Where are we? Okay, so people have talked about Police Academy movies. We're going off topic on that. We're sticking with the science fiction stuff, guys, so keep that in mind. And what was this, Michelle? Each of them have made the return.
Right.
It's an ad. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, that's right, because they use the actual actor. He's an adult now. So that's cool. There's nothing wrong with that. You can have a bit of a lark at that. But, yes. But you can think of examples. If somebody said we're doing a remake of this or a reboot of this, you'd be going, oh, my God. There was a comment back here from good old Aaron about Planet of the Apes. They weren't actually remakes. They were a reimagining of the original story. So if you took the original story of not necessarily the 5 movies, but the first couple and the backstory, they've sort of reimagined the backstory of that. They've avoided like the 3rd and 4th film effectively, but they've taken the primary concept of the fact that humans picked up a disease that made them all mute, and that's then the apes were able to sort of improve their intelligence. So not strictly remakes, but they were a very good trilogy. There's no denying that at all. So, which was very, very cool. Nearly an hour and no Star Wars mentioned. Well, there's nothing. I don't know. It's a whole other discussion in its own way. Some things worked, some things didn't work. It's up to the individual. And for myself personally, I'll just put it in there. I loved Attack of the Clones. I was a huge fan of that. There was a couple of stupid scenes in it. But other than that, Star Wars is sort of like, it's, I don't know, a show unto itself. But Star Wars gets covered off in all these other programs, all these other podcasts and all the rest of it. If you want to hear all that, that's where those things can be found. We're here, I guess, talking about the other stuff. the things that people don't talk about. And having said that, Claire's been yapping on about Star Trek.
Sorry.
I'm only kidding. So, and of course, you know what happens when you start yapping on about Star Trek? We do this. Oh, dear. Michelle mentioned that I never heard of the Hunger Games before the movie. Neither had I, actually, and I didn't get to watch them until they all came out. So unlike a lot of people who watch one movie, had to wait 2 years or another year between movies, I got to watch them all back to back, and that was a fantastic series. And I've got to say, in terms of movies made in the past 20 years, I class them as 3 films, even though there's 4. Yeah, that was an outstandingly good series, and of course, it's based on the books. I assume you've seen those?
Yeah, I have. I really enjoyed them. I think one of the reasons nobody had heard of them very long before the movie was because the books hadn't actually been out all that long before the movies were made. But yeah, that was a really good series. Good casting in that, particularly. Some interesting casting choices in that, actually.
Yeah. And the whole dystopian sort of like, because it's set in the future, so it is so it's like it is sci-fi in its own way, but it's not like it's an alternative timeline. It's just a different future to us. And yeah, it was a lot more enjoyable than I thought it was going to be. And I really appreciate the fact that the last 2 movies were completely different to the first 2, and it just made a beautiful packaged saga story. It was absolutely excellent. Gavin has said Star Wars rocks. Yeah, I mean, I'm a huge Star Wars fan. I always have been. So I'm not being critical of Star Wars. I'm just saying that I guess for this discussion, we're sort of looking at other franchises and other stories and other movies and TV shows, because Star Wars gets covered off everywhere else. And Claire's not the biggest Star Wars fan in the world, so I don't want to bore the crap out of her. I do want her to come back next week for the next episode. So.
I do like Star Wars. Like, don't let Dags make you think that I'm anti Star Wars, because I'm not. It's just not my favorite thing. And to be honest, I haven't watched very many of the shows that have been on. I've seen 1 or 2 episodes of some of them, and that's about it. So it's just not really my thing.
That's fair enough too. NPS, good old NPS has made a mention about Jedi Heritage. For those out there who want to know, Jedi Heritage is a fan film that we're all involved with back in the mid-2000s. So 15 years ago, can you believe it? So, yeah, I think it's on YouTube. Check it out. See what you think. Have a whale of a time with that. Dave has asked if you have a favourite Trek.
Oh, that's...
And I don't mean like which way you go to the shops, whether you go left or right outside the house. We're actually talking about Star Trek here, so, yeah.
My trek is down to Northland and back these days. That's about it.
Seriously? So you got a favourite Star Trek?
My top 2, which are pretty equal, are both movies rather than shows, and that's First Contact, the Borg Queen and Picard, and the 2009 reboot. Like, for me, it's right up there. If you're asking about shows, that's harder, because I like different things about all of them. But if I were forced to pick one, I'd probably say Deep Space Nine.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, there were just things about Deep Space Nine that really resonated with me, I think. And some of it was the characters, and some of it was the storylines. But yeah, I'll watch any and all of it.
Very, very good. Dave has made a mention about the Highlander remakes. Highlander was a perfect example of something that started off really, really well and then sort of went down the gurgler very, very, very quickly. And in recent times, funnily enough, some people out there might be aware that Kevin Smith did the He-Man Revelations animated series, which when the trailer first came out, practically every He-Man Master of the Universe fan was absolutely drooling over. And then when the show came out, it just split the fan base in 2. Those who said it was great and those who really didn't like it at all. And it's almost as if you could go back in time, you'd be whispering in Kevin's ear, "Don't make it, dude. You know, it's not worth it. It's not worth the stress you're going to get over it." So, I'm not the target audience for this sort of thing. I enjoyed it, but I know I can understand that some Master Universe fans were very, very disappointed with it. And yeah, that's a tough one, isn't it? So, made with the best intentions, with the right idea, with the person behind it who could do no wrong, and in the end, it's upset a few bodies along the way. So. There you go. Michelle has said, HG, those movies were made by having Donald and Jen and the other characters. Sorry, HG, I have no idea what you're Hunger Games, sorry. I just realised having Donald and Jen, the other characters were, but those 2 made it. Yeah. So, but I agree with you, Hunger Games overall. I mean, Donald Sutherland was a fantastic bad guy in that. So, There you go. Gavin has said his would be next gen with Picard. Yeah, Picard's an interesting one. It's sort of promised a lot, delivered a lot, had a lot of fan service, and then right at the end has a very questionable ending as to whether people agree with it or not. So I think if you got up to the second last episode, you go, that is an awesome show. And then I don't know what you think. I mean, you're obviously the biggest Star Trek fan of the two of us. How did you find Picard at the end?
No, I felt the same way. There were kind of, for me, there was a fairly big hole in the logic behind some of what happened towards the end. But, I'll keep watching, and I'll keep, there are things about it that I really like. Then some of the new characters are really interesting, and I kind of want to see where they're going to go with those.
So just while we're on that subject, so obviously in the second season, they're bringing Q back. Now, first thoughts, what are your first thoughts without knowing anything more about it than that? What's your opinion?
Well, the interplay between Q and Picard was always really interesting to me. Picard was kind of like a father figure for Q. Like, he gave him a bit of discipline, and he made him accountable in a way that had never happened before. And I think that has really interesting sort of aspects to it. But also, I don't know about spoilers, but Picard's in a different position now than he was back then. He's not nearly so fragile. And that
we can discuss spoilers because the show was out like last year. So if you haven't watched it yet, kids, too bad. So sad we're about to ruin it for you.
I mean, I don't need to go into detail, but Picard is a lot less physically fragile than he was back in the day, and I think that has potential to shift the dynamic between him and Q as well. So yeah, I think it'll be interesting. Although Delancey, as an actor, getting older, and therefore Q looking older, might be a little odd, given that Q is supposed to be, forever.
Yeah. For myself, I just looked at it and thought, why are they just rehashing an original character from way back when? It's like you should be going forward, not like dredging up the past. It's almost like, who are we going to do as a bad guy? Oh, we'll bring Q back. It's like, yeah.
But I think the difference. So for me, with the Star Trek movies, that was the biggest problem I had with the second of the reboot series, was that they rehashed an old story and they didn't do as good a job of it. But I think with Picard, it's a little bit different because you're already starting with sort of previous characters and continuing the story, so it kind of makes sense to bring them in. Although personally, I would prefer them to go somewhere new. I mean, there's so much scope for new and interesting stories and new and interesting characters that would be my preferred direction.
Yeah. Adzi has said that Picard had a Battlestar Galactica type ending, and I guess that's probably not far from the truth. Q is like Gozer. He can choose his form. That's true. So he decided to become an older dude instead of a younger dude. So there you go.
Oh, why would you?
Gavin, hang on. And Gavin, Babylon 5 was in the 1990s, dude. We're talking about the 21st century. So it missed it by that much. So there you go. And I know that for a fact because the final episode came out in 1999. So very, very cool. So but we'll save that for another discussion on another episode, which gives you a reason to come back and join us. So very, very cool. So there was chats earlier about, like you said about Firefly was obviously a very, very successful show when it first came out in the early 2000s. Now it's almost 20 years later. It's sort of like quietly, like Babylon 5, funnily enough, sort of getting lost in the past. One thing that I did watch, because I'd never seen it before, it was on 7 Plus last year or the year before, was the Sarah Connor Chronicles. And I thought it was an interesting concept of saying we've got all these Terminator movies and someone has put a series that sort of slides in the middle here, doesn't exactly 100% fit with the canon. But I thought it was a very interesting sort of take on the story. And I do think that if you've got all these movies and you do put a TV show in the middle of it somewhere and quietly slipping it in, because, after all a decade or two of the original movies, you can do that and get away with it. So I don't know if you actually saw that one at all. Did you?
I saw some of it. I don't know how long it went for in the end, but I did watch a few episodes. It didn't sort of grab me enough for me to keep going with it. Like, I didn't hate it, but there were other things to watch, so I picked other things over it, that's all.
I think there's a lot to be said about whether you can just sit in front of a stream service and binge watch an entire show in one day, or whether you got to wait week after week after week after week. And I think that's where people's patience gets tested, and they go, you know what, I can't be fagged coming back next week or waiting a season for the following year, and then you just lose interest in all the rest of it. But when they are all out and you can just say, I'll just plow through the whole lot in one go. That I think has a lot going for it. What do you reckon?
Yeah, that's true. I think if you have to, if it doesn't grab you immediately, you're not going to wait. Whereas if you can watch the next episode, you can sort of say, oh, well, maybe it'll get better and just keep going. So, yeah, it's a different way of watching things.
So, William, you're talking about, I think Babylon 5 hasn't been rebooted. And I think if you're a hardcore Babylon 5 fan, you never want to see it rebooted, remade, anything. It is just perfection of its own, and it needs to be just left alone. With that in mind, Crusade, which was the sequel to Babylon 5, had a pretty bit of a sad death. It only lasted like a dozen episodes. It had like a Firefly kind of life, sort of in and out. You get one DVD, and there's a whole box set right there and then. So, some stories don't have a very happy ending, unfortunately. So, yes. So, regarding just going back to movies, right? So, I'm just going to mention a couple of movies that I look through and I go, I'd forgotten about this, and I've forgotten about that, and I've forgotten about this, all made in the 21st century, and just see how many of these you've seen. So, did you know that there's two versions of The Invisible Man? You got Hollow Man, made in the early 2000s, and Invisible Man. Have you seen either of those?
I'm sure I saw Hollow Man because it was Kevin Bacon, right?
Yeah.
I definitely saw that one.
It wasn't just Kevin Bacon, it was a nude Kevin Bacon as well. Oh, there we go. Whip out your bread, girls.
Yeah.
There's a sandwich I want to slam down. Anyway, go on, sorry.
But the Invisible Man one, that was quite recent, wasn't it? And wasn't it more of a horror from what I saw?
Yeah, it was. So the person puts on a suit, and that's what makes him invisible, as opposed to the Hollow Man, where they inject him with this stuff. And I think Hollow Man, what made it work was the visual effects of making the person disappear. So they don't just go boink, they vanish. They slowly disappear, and you get to see all the muscles and the skeletal system and the blood work. And just visually, it was mind blowing. Right, it was absolutely fantastic. It was cutting edge of digital technology, in my view. So it's worth watching just for that, whether you like the story or not. But the current version of The Invisible Man was excellent because most of the time, it's a stupid thing to say, most of the time you didn't see the person. Boom, tish. It was just suggested. So you'd end up with a character in the foreground and empty space in the side. And you're thinking, well, is the character there or not? So it was very, 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 very clever. So, yes, there was absolutely awesome. And, yeah, Joe was going to actually watch that. Well worth checking out. It was fantastic. Invisible Man was great. And you taking the story. It was Australian made with it. I didn't know that, actually.
Okay.
Yes. I just very quickly at the start of the show, it's really, really quiet. The lady gets out of bed really, really early in the morning. And it's because I had headphones on, right? And as she's trying to sneak out of the house, she kicks the dog bowl. And it's like a bang. And I was like, oh, my God, scared the shit out of me. So, yes, exactly right. There was a mention about Orville by the Vile. We'll get to TV shows in a few ticks. He had AI, artificial intelligence, which was the Steven Spielberg, Francis Ford Coppola. No, it was. Coppola was Stanley Kubrick, combination. You remember that at all? With the kid who becomes, all that? Do you remember that?
Yeah, that was pretty good. I don't know. It was a bit too kind of dreamy.
Intense.
Sorry?
Yeah. It was a bit intense, that's for sure.
Yeah, well, it was definitely that. I think, I don't know, they kind of didn't explore quite the things I was expecting them to. It's a while since I watched it, so.
I remember the kid's name. I forgot the kid's name, but when he's holding the teddy bear and the teddy says, because the teddy's got a bit of sentience and says, if he drops him from a height, he'll break, and you go, oh, you're crying your eyes out over the teddy bear. But that was a pretty intense movie for its age, for its time, that's for sure. Just quickly, AI was good but boring. Yeah, I guess it was. It had that. You could tell the Stanley Kubrick influence. There's no denying that at all. Where are we? Would a Flash Gordon series work out today? Well, they've done a Flash Gordon series not that long ago, and apparently it was absolutely terrible. So trying to recapture that image and that style back then, it may work, providing the stories would have to be upgraded, though, to make it more interesting. You had the movie Final Fantasy, The Spirits Within, which was the first CG, all CG movie using digital characters and trying to create organic digital environments and all the rest of it, which destroyed the studios completely who were involved with it because of the budgeting and the cost. But did you ever see Final Fantasy at all, The Spirits Within?
No? I didn't. I'm aware of it, but I haven't seen it.
It was a film that was really good. The problem was because it was based on an anime or a game system, it worked on the whole thing of the Gaia. So the Earth has like a spirit and a heart and all this sort of business. And I think for most sci-fi fans, they go, mate, nah, just give me ships, blowing the crap out of everybody. But well worth checking out. Even today, I think it still holds up, which is kind of cool. Minority Report was actually one that was like trying to predict the future. But the whole thing of not having computer screens is all up in the air and all sort of business. Remember that?
Yes, that was pretty awesome. That was actually a really good movie.
Yeah. And the idea of predicting the future using the technology that they've got. So
that was pretty well. I mean, in the end, it wasn't all technology, was it? That was doing the predicting.
Yeah.
But it was the way they were using the technology and that pre-crime, that whole pre-crime thing.
Yeah.
That was fascinating. Like, how do you? I mean, these are the sorts of shows that I like watching because they bring up these sorts of questions. You know, if you're convicting someone for a crime they haven't committed, how do you know they were actually going to commit it? Because maybe something would have changed and they wouldn't. So all that kind of stuff was really interesting. But that was when I first kind of really started to like Tom Cruise. Like, I wasn't a huge fan of his until he got older and started doing the more substantial roles, I suppose. Yeah, I love that.
Very cool.
Can I just? Sorry, Colin's made a comment about All Claire Needs is a sci-fi movie starring Kevin Bacon and Christian Slater. All over it. Yep, that would be me.
Easily pleased. Absolutely love it. There was a comment about Upgrade 2018. I haven't. I don't know if you have it all. No?
I haven't heard of it.
There's going to be a lot of stuff that, because when I was looking at this, there's a lot of stuff that's come and gone and you just missed it. And it's like, oh, I didn't even know the thing even existed. A classic example, the one that came out not that long ago that sort of did the rounds and people sort of, unless you knew someone who knew about it, you just missed it altogether, was called I Am Mother. And all it has is one robot and one child, and that's it. And that was made in Australia too. And that was absolutely ingenious. So did you ever see that one at all?
I started watching it but didn't finish it. I think I didn't have streaming services for a while, so I watched a bit of it at my sister's place and then didn't get to finish it. But I do want to see the rest of it for sure.
Yeah, well worth checking out. So that's an example of something that was made recently and is actually really, really cool. Ads has mentioned that we're going to discuss a couple of these a bit later on. Oblivion now, I've only ever seen Oblivion. Actually, no, I've seen it a couple of times. That was very clever. That was actually one of the rare stories where the bad guys actually win. At least until the very end of the story, if that makes sense. So, so that was another Tom Cruise story. So how'd that work for you?
Yeah, that was a really good one. I've actually watched that again just recently. It's been on TV pretty regularly over the last 18 months or so, I've noticed. It was just fascinating and such a small movie in terms of characters, but such a big movie in terms of scope of what was happening. Yeah, that was a really interesting one. The relationships and the change in the relationships and the mistakes that were made by the bad guys, that kind of stuff was really interesting. Yeah, I liked that.
I just remember, my nerdy brain just remembered the kid in AI, because I was thinking Dave, and so that's not right. It's David. So I thought I'd just chuck that in, just in case people thought I was a complete turtle. And now, you as a book reader, I was intrigued by your concept, your thoughts on this I, Robot, the Will Smith film. What do you think of that?
That's interesting because I really liked it. There's very little connection with the original story, but there are connections with other stories. So Asimov wrote, like I, Robot is actually a book of short stories. It's not really a single story. It's a connected series of stories, and there were elements of different stories in that one movie. But there were some things that I saw it and I thought that's from the book, like the sugar, the piles and piles of sugar in the tea, the coffee. That was just like, oh my God, I remember that. That was awesome. But I really liked it. I thought it was very well done. The robots were really cool, and Will Smith and his attitude in that just worked brilliantly. Like it just made the story work. So yeah, I really, even though it was completely different from the book, there was enough of a connection to see the connection, and I thought it worked really well. I really enjoyed it. Yeah.
No, I totally. I obviously didn't know anything about the books, but from a movie point of view, I found it very entertaining and had a really good story.
Yeah.
Yeah, the concept of Sonny, you sort of connected with Sonny, even though he was a robot, which is kind of funny because by today's definition, they wouldn't use the word robot, android, any other term, but not robot. Robots are things that build cars on production lines, but it kind of worked. And yeah, I totally agree with you. So I'm just going to chuck in a couple more because our aim is to only have this show to go for 1 hour, and we've got about 10 minutes to go.
Oh, wow.
So just to show, otherwise we didn't just want to drone on and have people go, oh my God, how boring is this? There's a few that I could chuck in, but I'll just stick in 2 more before we get to our sort of effectively our top 5 from the.
Sorry, can I just before you do, Dags, Michelle's made a comment about the 3 rules. Yeah, the 3 rules really have become almost gospel. If anyone doesn't know, they're the Asimov's rules of robotics. He was the one who came up with them originally. It was part of the iRobot series. And they basically control robot behavior so that they can't hurt human beings or allow a human being to come to harm. But yeah, they make so much sense. Like, I mean, that was written decades and decades ago. Those stories were, the middle of last century, and still those 3 rules were so sensible that they've pretty much become the standard. And it's interesting, because a lot of stories are about when those 3 rules don't work or aren't in effect.
Did you know the original version of that, when the 3rd rule was, if you see a human being being injured, you whip out a video camera and film it and stick it on YouTube and give you $1,000. So there's a couple more that I know we're going to actually, I can't help, we're just going to run over time by a couple of minutes, so don't panic, everybody. There's a couple I really wanted to bring up. Like the first one I absolutely adored when it first came out was Sky Captain: The World of Tomorrow. Gorgeous movie to look at, and like the person who made it was the only film I think they ever made. It just didn't take off. It was way ahead of its time in terms of its visual imagery. Did you ever see that at all?
I did. It a long time ago, and that's what I remember about it. I don't even particularly remember the story, but I do remember the visual beauty of it. It was stunning. Yeah.
Totally agree. It's very funny you should mention about Alan Tudyk. He's ended up playing a lot of single motion capture characters. So recently, obviously he's appeared in Resident Alien, but of course he was the in one of the Star Wars movies, Rogue One, as K2SO. Very, very cool. And I just wanted to quickly chuck in, you had the movie The Island, right, with Ewan McGregor and Scarlett Johansson, I think it was.
Yeah.
It was a Michael Bay film, but up until the point where they escaped, it was a great story. It was really, really good. It was really, really interesting. And then, of course, once they escaped, Michael Bay said, "Nah, blow shit up. I want to see lots of action." And it was just shit house after that. But up to that point, it was really cool.
Well, interestingly, that's kind of where it diverged from the book.
Yeah, I like this comment from Colin. Yeah, Skynet didn't get the memo on the 3 rules, but I agree with you. Yeah, you're right. A lot of movies sort of follow this mindset now of the 3 rules of robotics, which is very, very cool. Yes, and just quickly, my two more I just want to quickly chuck in. One was the success of Ready Player One, which is obviously based on the book, and a lot of people dial into it because of the pop culture references, and they were absolutely everywhere. But what I thought was interesting is that people sort of forgot that it's set in a dystopian environment where the real world is really miserable and unhappy, and you get so taken in by the digital world that you sort of forget that for the real people, it's not a very, very good environment for them to live in at all. So, but did you read the book at all? Because you're a bit of a book.
I haven't read the book. No, I did see the movie and really enjoyed it, but I haven't read the book. There's a lot of dystopian stuff out at the moment. A lot.
Oh yeah, people love miserable environments and miserable stories. For myself, and just quickly, the prequel version of The Thing. So you had The Thing made in 1982, and then they did a prequel version of it in 2011. So set at the Denmark or the Norwegian base, which is I really enjoyed it. I absolutely loved it. So, but I just wanted to chuck that one in as a bit of a good measure. And we're just going to finish this off with Orville. Now, of course, Orville was, as some people said, the Star Trek that wasn't Star Trek. So just quickly, what are your thoughts on the good old Orville?
Oh, I loved it. I thought it was great. It was what Star Trek, the original series, should have been, I think, but probably couldn't be back when it was made. But it did all the same sorts of things. It told the stories in a way that made it look like it was telling the story about someone else, but it was really obviously about us. It did all those sorts of things, and it pushed the boundaries, and it did it with sensitivity, but also with a lot of humor. I really enjoyed it. There were some great characters in that too. Kelly is one of my favorites. She was, and that having that that ex-husband, ex-wife relationship on the bridge, just that's kind of what made it stand out from a lot of the other shows. It seemed very real because there were so many people in it that were just people. Like they weren't Starfleet officers and absolutely perfect and get everything right 99% of the time. They were actual people who did stupid things and made mistakes and then had to deal with the consequences. I really loved it. I thought it was great. It's kind of a shame that it may not.
Oh, that's okay. I mean, sometimes the best shows are the ones that only just have a short lifespan. Firefly being a perfect example. I mean, there wasn't much of it, but what you got where you really enjoyed and you really sort of like it became like infamous because of that. The Violins brought up Iron Sky. It's up to each person to think of what they think of Iron Sky. I loved it. It was magnificently made, but the fact that they put the comedic element into it, that I think ruined it rather than trying to be a straight drama. But on the other hand, had it been a straight drama, it might have been like disappointing. So I don't know if you ever saw Iron Sky, just quickly. Yeah. Your thoughts?
About the same as yours. I mean, it seemed to be unbalanced. So it felt like it should have been one or the other, and it tried to be both and didn't quite work.
Yeah, exactly right. Dave said Orville was a bit like Galaxy Quest, and I guess that's completely true as well. So there you go. All right, so we're running a fraction behind. It wasn't meant to be like this, actually. It was supposed to finish 10 minutes ago. So we're just going to run through very, very quickly. And some of these have been mentioned already, but some haven't, actually. Our own top 10-ish, which was a very difficult list for both of us to compile, I've got to say. So we'll kick off, Claire. So you've already mentioned you like a good old Star Trek Deep Space Nine, Star Trek 2009, yeah?
Yeah, definitely. It was. It's one of my top 2 favorite Star Trek things ever. It just worked really well for me. I loved it.
Cool. This one?
Clever Man was really interesting. It's Australian and it's very Australian, and I really loved that about it. But it's another one of those ones that kind of it's sort of a little bit future, but also sort of a little bit alternate timeline-ish. And worth a watch. It talks about how groups of people can be treated in such a way that make them, just because they're a little bit different, make them seem other, and therefore not human, and therefore not they don't have to be treated humanely. It's really worth a watch, and some really good Australian actors in it. I loved it. Brilliant.
In the old days, it would have had Bill Hunter or Jack Thompson, any of those regulars who just popped up in every Australian thing ever. So,
he and Glenn kind of feels like the new Bill to me.
Very, very good. Next one.
Oh, The Martian. Yeah. Look, this. I loved this. I really like the near future stuff. The stuff you can almost have the technology already towards it. And this was another one where he was so human, like he was such a person. It wasn't just a character on the screen; it was someone that you could relate to. And he was doing stupid things. He was a botanist, and he was doing all these mechanical stuff. And he made a stupid mistake, and it changed, it sort of affected everything. And he struggled through it. And he had the laughter and the laughing at himself and it had everything, this one. And the science was sound. I think there's only one kind of thing in it that isn't quite necessarily technically correct for Mars, but I loved the fact that it was super scientific. The book on this was really interesting because the comments that a lot of people made on the book was, oh my God, it's so like sciencey. And I read it and I was like, but it's not. Yes. I'm going to science the shit out of it. But it's just such a great line. So human, so us. Yeah, I loved The Martian.
Very good. And if you're ever buying potatoes from your local supermarket, you'll never look at them the same way again. So
actually, that's the green story. So just really quickly, when we went down into lockdown, I think it was 2 lockdowns ago, I had just bought a 2-kilo bag of potatoes. And so my comment on Facebook was something like, I've got 2 kilos of potatoes. I can do this. And that turned into the Mark Watney potato lockdown fortnight, where I had to have potatoes every night and was posting them every night. And so the next lockdown, I was challenged instead to eat something green every night. And so I did that. And then this current lockdown, I'm doing both. So I've got to eat something potatoes and something green every day and post the photos on Facebook. So follow me there.
Yes. So what this is telling everybody out there is that Claire really does need lockdown to end so she can get into the real world.
A little bit.
Okay, very good. Anyway, we move on. So there we go.
Altered Carbon. Anyone who knows me knows that I love this. The book is my favorite book ever out of all the books I've ever read in my entire life. And the show just totally lived up to and exceeded my expectations. It's very adult. It's pretty intense. It's pretty violent at times. But the concepts, the ideas, the things that they make you think about, we're heading towards this type of technology, and we have to figure out how we're going to use it. And this does a little bit of exploring of that while being a real kick-ass, awesome show.
No, I haven't seen the second season myself, but the first season was really good. And yeah, you are right. The concept of how it works, the technology is like something that's really left field, and it does make you think, that's for sure.
Yeah. Black Mirror is really interesting. If you haven't seen it, they're all individual episodes. There's no sort of ongoing storyline. There's no ongoing characters. They're all individual shows. And they all do that same sort of thing. They take the technology we have now and push a little bit further forward into the future with it. And then they explore what we as human beings decide to do with that technology. I've been rewatching it. They've been showing it again on SBS, I think. But I think it's available on, I think it's on Netflix. I can't remember. It's on one of the streaming services. And it just gets you thinking. Like, it's the kind of show that you watch a couple of episodes and then you just can't get them out of your head. The last season, it got kind of Americanized, and so I don't think it was as good. The first few seasons were British, and in some cases very British, but very well done, beautifully filmed, all that kind of stuff. Absolutely worth watching, even if you only watch one or two episodes. Any of them are great.
Yeah, I can support that one as well. So there you go.
Yeah,
very good.
Orphan Black is fascinating. It's a lot about clones and about someone who's been cloned and doesn't know that she's been cloned, and then sort of accidentally impersonates one of her clones and then gets sucked into the whole drama of everything that's going on with her and her clones. And I can't remember the lead actress's name, but she is absolutely brilliant. She is playing 4 completely different versions of this one character, because the clones have all been raised in different places, with different families, with different lifestyles, in different. So their attitudes are different, lives are different. It's brilliant. I just loved it. Absolutely loved it. I'm about to start watching it again, in fact.
Very cool. And just quickly, David said that Moon from 2009 was highly recommended. I can't remember the lead actor's name, but I'm not a big fan of his, but the actual show itself was actually very, very cool. So well done for that. Oh, good old Firefly. Yeah, well, there we go. Eh?
I've already talked about this, I love Firefly. It was just great. It was fun. It was a Western in space. It used different cultures. It wasn't as Americanized as a lot of them are. And again, the characters. For me, a lot of the time, what I love about the show is the characters. And this was just such a great group cast. It was such a great ensemble cast. Totally worth watching. And the movie Serenity as well was a really good way to kind of round it up. Yeah, loved it.
Sorry, it was Sam Rockwell. So thanks, Sam.
That's right.
It's very, very cool. I just looked at this picture and I thought, geez, Nathan Fillion looks so young as opposed to how he looks on The Rookie at the moment. But So it's one of those shows that did very, very well, probably because it was so short-lived, and its fan base has been very, very devoted ever since, which is very, very cool. And Thomas has said it's in his top 10, which is groovy. Yeah. So there you go.
Yeah. This is one of those movies that, like, if you're channel surfing, which I know not everyone does anymore, but I still do. And this comes on, no matter what point it's up to, I will start watching it and I will watch it to the end. Emily Blunt and Tom Cruise, and that combination of the two of them together just works really well. And the story is fascinating. And I really like that you can't pick a hole in the logic. A lot of these kind of sort of time travel-y sort of ones, there are great big gaping holes where you're like, yeah, but if that, then it can't be this kind of thing. And you don't find that in this one. It's kind of a Groundhog Day thing for Tom Cruise, but brilliantly made, like really clever, really intelligent, really the way they explore what they're trying to do and how they have to come to the resolution in the end. I just really enjoy it every single time I watch it. Yeah.
And the aliens, which I think are called mimics, are pretty scary. Now, it's quite funny for everybody out there. So when we were putting this list together, Claire sent me through, instead of Edge of Tomorrow, she wrote down Edge of Reason. And when I looked up Edge of Reason, that's a Bridget Jones Diary movie. And I was thinking, all right, she's obviously been smoking too many of her greenies and eating too many potatoes. I'm thinking, why would a Bridget Jones Diary movie be in this?
It was the middle of the workday and I was in a rush.
Well, there we go. And I'm thinking, yeah, okay, so you're right, Claire. And then I had to clarify it. Yeah, it was Edge of Tomorrow. And I totally agree. Absolutely loved it too.
Yeah.
It was just ingenious. Yeah,
and Adam's just made a comment about the comedy in Edge of Reason. Yeah. They did that really well. It's very clever. Very clever.
Yeah, it's Edge of Tomorrow, not Edge of Reason. Get off the Bridget Jones. And this is your last one, I think.
Fringe is really great. I'm in the middle of rewatching Fringe at the moment, and it's just fascinating. The whole idea of this. I mean, he's a mad scientist, and he just explores anything and everything. And then there's this kind of loop effect where they're using him to solve problems, but half the time it turns out he was the one who started the problem in the first place. And the duplicate worlds and the sort of different versions of people and all that kind of stuff. It's a fascinating show. I've every time I've watched it, and I've watched it several times right through, I really enjoy it. And Anna Torv is really great. She's Australian, and she's just started another show called The Newsreader, which I haven't watched yet, but I'm going to. She's really good as a female lead. She doesn't do the whole having to be a butch, tough FBI guy type person. She's a woman and she behaves like a woman, and I really like that. I found that helped me identify with it really well. But the storyline, the stories are great. Some of the random stuff that they come up with and that they do in this sort of fringe science is just fascinating. Yeah, and the mad scientist is great.
Very cool. Dave, I like this one. Fringe is not about a haircut. So, yeah. We're not going off on different strands, if you know what I mean, and different discussions. So, no, very, very cool.
He doesn't get a Fringe until season 3.
Good stuff. Well done. I think in America they call them bangs, don't they? I don't know why they do that. Yeah. But so, all right, that's Claire's top 10. I'll whiz through mine pretty quickly. If people have been following me, Googling on for the past couple of years, will know my stuff pretty well. So, first off, this is just my top five movies, and it was damn hard trying to narrow it down to 5 movies. V for Vendetta, which is an absolutely outstanding film. When I saw it in the cinemas, didn't know anything about it. Wasn't aware that it was based on a graphic novel, and it was another dystopian movie. And I love the fact, one, they didn't take his mask off, as in V's mask off, and two, they sort of just subtly explained the entire environment, and you had to figure it out as you went along. And it was just one of those movies that just did no wrong at all, and I absolutely loved it. And the fact it's set in England instead of America, which was very, very, very cool. So if you've never seen V for Vendetta, you need to check it out, and it's a very, very good movie. So, yes, thank you, Dave. V was awesome. And, that's the name of the character too, V. Cloverfield, love my monster movies, but this one took my breath away because at the very start of the film, it's all about a couple and their sort of relationship problems, and it's all done through the point of view of someone carrying a video camera, very much like Blair Witch Project. And I remember watching this, I was so invested in the story of what was going on with this couple, I completely forgot it was a monster movie. And I looked at this and I thought, you know what, it is completely, in my opinion, 100% believable. And the fact that the people involved were nobodies. They weren't heroes. They weren't like superpowers. They were just normal people caught up in a very difficult situation. And it was absolutely ingenious. However, some people have said don't watch it in the cinemas because it can make a big crook because of the Blair Witch sort of camera work. But and I know there were sequels made after this, but Cloverfield, which is the only one I've seen so far of the group, I absolutely adored. So there you go. Tron Legacy. Now, if you're a fan of Tron from 1982, I saw this in the cinemas, and it was 3D. It was just magnificent to watch, and it carried on the previous story really, really, really well. And I was just taken in by the effects, because you start off wearing the glasses in the normal real world, and it's just 2D, and then you get into the digital world, and suddenly 3D just kicks in. It's like, oh my god, and you really feel like you're coming in a completely different environment. I thought it was a very, very credible story, and definitely a sequel that they did really well with, and it fits in beautifully with the original movie. So if you're a fan of Tron, as I am, it was definitely a winner. District 9, I actually showed a couple of friends of this when I saw this movie. It took me years after the fact to check it out. The thing that makes this film work is the fact that it's to do with dealing with racial issues, but of course it occurs in South Africa, right? Now, of course, South Africa was hindered by apartheid for all those years, and now we have a scenario where a third race or a gender or whatever gets involved, and all of a sudden the racial issues have all now reappeared, except this time it's the black people, the white people versus the aliens. And I thought, what an interesting take on that concept. And of course, it's designed like a documentary at the start of the show, and then it moves into its normal sort of film storyline afterwards, the normal narrative. But in terms of something ingenious, it's a bit of an eye-opener, actually, and some of it is actually based on some aspects of true life. Do you ever see District 9?
I loved it. It was brilliant. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, very violent though. Certainly not one for the kiddies,
yes.
That's for sure. But it's just
very well
completely, completely believable, and absolutely adored it. And we'll talk about the Planet of the Apes movies earlier. I loved Dawn of the Planet of the Apes. It was just an ingenious sequel to the first movie. Rise was really, really good, but when we got into Dawn, which is where we're a bit further down the track, and humans have been inflicted by the disease, and they're all turning into mutes and whatever else. It was great because it's all from the point of view of the apes, and the fact that you had Caesar and you had Koba, and Koba, of course, is the one who's very, very anti-human because of the way he was treated as a test subject. And from that perspective alone, it is just ingenious. I thought in terms of sequels, it's one of the best sequels I've ever seen, and I absolutely loved it. War of the Planet of the Apes, which came after it, was very intense, very hardcore, and very little bit difficult to watch. But I thought Dawn was just absolute magic, and I thought they completely nailed it. So worth checking out just for that, even if you don't even see the other two. So so that's my top 5 movies. I was going to include Attack of the Clones from the Star Wars series because I absolutely adored it, but I thought, no, these ones kind of edged that out. So in terms of TV series, so I love V from the 80s, and they did the remake. Only went for 2 seasons, and I really enjoyed it. I thought they did a really, really good job with it. They even brought back a couple of actors from the original series in the 80s, and it was a very respectful remake, and very, very clever too, saying if you're an alien species wanting to take over the Earth, you arrive ahead of time before the ships turn up. And, of course, the people sort of infiltrate, the aliens infiltrate society before the ships arrive. And, of course, the aliens come down with the nefarious means, but, of course, they got integrated into the society, and then suddenly they have a change of heart and want to save society rather than have Anna and the visitors take over. So I really liked it. I thought it was good. It ended on a cliffhanger, and the show got cancelled, and that was the end of that. But, it kind of really worked for me. Westworld, we discussed Westworld earlier. Definitely not one for the kids. It is very hardcore, a lot of nudity, both male and female, a lot of violence. It's very intense, but and very cerebral too. So if you want a popcorn show, don't watch this. You really need to pay attention. It's very intense, and it is very hard going. Now, personally, I didn't like the 3rd season so much. The first 2 seasons were excellent. But in terms of saying, okay, if you create robots that you can do anything to, what happens when they start gaining sentience and an understanding of who they are and what they are? And for that reason, it was a huge step above what they did in the 1974 movie. So absolutely loved it. But it's definitely not for everybody. I've known some people to say, you know what, I can't get it. It's too hard for me to sort of follow. But if you can get through it, it's outstanding. Watchmen, of course, it was a sequel based on the film, and which was based on the graphic novel. I thought it was really, really cool. Set 20 years or so after when the movie was set. The movie was set in the about 1980s. This is set in the late 2000s, and it's all about how the Rorschach character's diary got completely misinterpreted by a new cult, a new cabal, and how everybody's sort of dealing with that. And they introduced a couple of new characters that were just for the film, for the series, but it was really well made, really well thought out, and it really dealt with a whole racial aspect, and it was very relevant to a couple of years ago where people are wearing masks, and especially today with COVID, people don't want to be identified and by other sort of like antagonistic groups and whatever else. And there's a lot, even if you look beyond just the comic book aspect of it, the story has a lot of things that relate to today, and I believe that was actually quite intentional. So I was very, very impressed, I've got to say. Now, I'm a huge fan of Battlestar Galactica, the remake series. Absolutely adored it because it was so adult. Gone are the days of Muffets and Daggetts and all that all rubbish. It was really, really intense. They even got rid of Boxy after a couple of episodes, the little kid, and it just pushed all my buttons because I thought, yeah, they've gone hardcore. Okay, they're not afraid to sort of add the violence in, add the extra sex in, make it very, very intense for the characters. And I thought that for a 5-year show, it's just one of those things that was absolutely ingenious, and even by today's standards, it holds up extremely well, and I absolutely loved it. Now, for that reason, I've got to chuck in a bonus entry. We only got top 5, but I'm going to add in a 5.1. Was the series Caprica, which was the prequel to Battlestar, even though it came out afterwards. There's only 2 seasons of this, but I was a huge fan of this because even though it was a science fiction show, they just said, well, let's just pretend there are no spaceships and there are no rocket ships and we're not like having laser guns and that. It is almost like a real world setting, but in a completely foreign place, which obviously is set on Caprica. And it just pushed all my buttons. For those who've never watched Caprica, and a lot of people haven't, it was magnificent. And the last 10 minutes of the last episode leads directly, effectively into the Battlestar series, and it was just absolutely magnificent. So I was very, very impressed. And just finally, I will chuck a Star Wars one in there. The animated series of the Clone Wars seasons 1 to 6. Really, this is when George Lucas was involved. It worked for me on a lot of levels, and of course the animation quality improved as we went along, but the stories also got more adult as they went along as well. So it wasn't necessarily for the kids. It had a little bit of that, but it also had a very serious side to it as well. And the fact that they're able to flesh out the stories for a lot of characters that had been established in the movies, it just did really, really well. So once Maul comes back in, and what they did with him was just magnificent. On paper, you began, that's gonna be completely stupid, but when it occurred, it was really, really good. And the whole thing with Anakin Skywalker and his connection to Padme and everything so they couldn't do it in the movies, but they did it in this series, and it was so if you watch Attack of the Clones, watch this series, and then get to Revenge of the Sith, it all makes a fantastic set of series of movies and TV shows worth looking at. So there you go. What do you reckon of that?
I'm just liking Gavin's comment. He started saying, "Sounds like I must achieve Caprica."
You must achieve Caprica, indeed. Yes, exactly right. It's I can't rate it highly enough. It was such an ingenious show, but it only lasted like 1 season or thereabouts. So yes, I love it. Very, very, very cool. And it looks like Thomas has enjoyed our stuff. So there you go. Even though we're running way over time. 12 Monkeys. When did 12 Monkeys come out? I forgot what year there was, but that was an excellent movie, I've got to say. So very, very, very cool. And I agree, Thomas, the 3-hour extended Watchmen is crazy, but and very violent. Oh, geez, they're nasty as. So very good stuff. All right, so normally we would prattle on for hours about science fiction stuff, and clearly a lot of people are really dialed into this, but we actually do have to bring this to an end. So next week we'll think of something a bit... Sorry, go on.
No, I was just going to say, Michelle's asked if we can put our lists in the comments after the show, so we should be able to do that, yeah? Yep,
we can certainly do that. So what about the other Clone Wars series? There was no other series. Like season 7 was the only one that came out for Clone Wars. Oh, you mean the one that came out between 2003 and 2002 and 2005? It was good, but not as good as the 3D version. So there you go. Have you got any final words before we sign off, Claire?
No, I mean, there was heaps of stuff that we could have talked about today. There's just so much good stuff out there. And we were going to have a bit on things that maybe didn't work so well, and we didn't even get to that.
Yeah. Focus on the positives. Yeah, I mean, some people like hanging, like sinking the boots into certain things, but other times you're going, just focus on making a happy show. The world's going to the crapper at the moment, so let's just think happy, smiley faces, and yes, it's all very. Unless you're talking about Highlander sequels, then people get upset. So
not so much.
Exactly right. So yeah, any further words you want to say before we sign off?
No, it's been fun.
Very good. Well, I hope listen, everybody out there has actually enjoyed listening to us rabbiting on about this stuff. So in the interim, yeah, we're still in lockdown. The curfew started like 18 minutes ago. So be sure to look after yourselves. With a bit of luck, we'll see you all next Monday, ready for more sci-fi action. So in the interim, make sure you all stay in the zone. Oh, I think you're going to say something.
No, I was just quoting you. Stay in the zone.
In the zone. Okay, see you later. See you next week. Okay, bye now.